we have this wonderful text, rich with this incredible story of Jesus' first signs in the Gospel of John. We have this wonderful text in which we are first introduced to Mary here in the Gospel of John. We've not heard of her up until this point. And we come. We come filled with wonder and longing as we look at this Epiphany, how God continues to shine a light, break into our world. And as we gather this day, we come and we hear from the Apostle Paul about the gifts that we are given as people of God in community for the sake of community. And of course with the children, it's wonderful to lift up those gifts and then for us to think about them as adults. But I'm also going to challenge you adults a little bit, especially those who are parents or grandparents or have nieces or nephews, great nieces or nephews, because how often is it that you are there in the kitchen or the dining room and entertaining guests saying, "Oh, you should hear, our son just learned this incredible piece on the piano. You've got to hear him play it." Or, "You should hear about how well they did in this incredible sporting event." Or, "Robotics has been going really well this year, and I want you to see what they've built." There's kind of that pride that wells up within parents and grandparents and those around the children to want to show off a little bit. And I can't help but imagine for Mary on this day that she has a sense that Jesus can do a little bit of showing off of his own. She's been around this young man that she has raised, and she has a sense that he can make something happen in this moment. And she's going to push and prod. Now, interestingly, as she pushes him to come and take center stage and make something happen, Jesus pushes back. "Woman, what concern is this to you or to me? My hour has not yet come." He's putting a kibosh, or so we think, on what she is asking him to do. How often do our children put up that wall to say, "Crazy, I'm not going to do this now. I'm not going to step into the middle of the dining room and perform on your every whim and command. Or go outside and make this happen for you." For Mary, however, very likely they have been invited to a family wedding, and for things to go wrong over the course of the 6 days or so of this wedding festival is a catastrophe. There is likely to be some shame associated with running out of food and beverage, of not being the perfect hosts. And so she is worried about the community, the people who are gathered, and she is going to give Jesus a big kick in the behind to say, "You need to make this happen for the sake of the community." And here we have an opportunity to learn something from Jesus. Oftentimes we hear the saying, the adage, "To do what I say and not as I do." Yet here, interestingly, we are challenged with this Jesus of Nazareth and his disciples to do as he does and not as he says. Here is one man who takes and pushes away the idea of making something happen, not going to do it, and yet turns around and somehow has a change of heart. He gives his instructions to the disciples and to the servants to fill up these huge water barrels. And he turns them into wine. Now I want to pause here for a moment because I think this is a significant point that we often don't talk about a lot. This Jesus that we encounter that says, "Woman, what is it to me and to you? My hour has not yet come." We like to downplay it and say, well, it's just maybe more of their colloquial element, and Jesus saying more, ma'am, we won't worry about this. What is it to me and to you? I think we need to realize that this is harsh. Woman, he is putting his mother in her place. Not a very good fourth commandment follower right there in terms of honoring your father and your mother. And yet, something within him changes. And he steps out, even though he says, "My hour has not yet come." I want us to think about what happens when we are hit face to face with some reality in our lives or in the world. How often we become defensive and we dig in our heels, just like that kid in the dining room or the living room. How often we struggle when we are being pushed or challenged to step out and do a new thing. Now we can reflect back on what happened here in Minnesota when it came to marriage equality. Don't make me do this now. I don't want to get involved. It's a tough issue. I don't know that we can win. It's frustrating, it's hard, it's emotional, it's painful. It doesn't belong in the church, it doesn't belong in politics. We get worked up. And then we come to what we've been working on over the last several years with racial justice. And it's so easy for us to think and to step into that place of Jesus. The time isn't right. Just be still, just be quiet, just let us work through this really slowly. And in this way, I think of who are the people who become the mothers, the midwives who aren't going to let us just sit there, who are going to keep challenging us and pushing to say, "Don't you get it?" The shame in our community is overwhelming. The pain in our community is present. We need to do something now, Jesus. And we know you have the power to make something happen. Now we can also think about what is happening with our environment and creation care. And we have a number of folks in our congregation who are very involved in this work in our locally and also in the Synod across the country. We're saying the hour has come now. Don't you get it? That as we continue to see the temperatures rise, although today we may question that, but as we continue to see the temperatures rise, as we continue to see what are happening to our lakes and our oceans, as we look at the polar ice cap, don't you get what is happening? The hour is now, and if you don't do something, we are in trouble. And it's more than just shame and a family feeling a little bit of hurt in their own community. It's a global crisis that affects us all. And Jesus, we know you have the power in and among the people to make something happen. Do it. Now. Do as I do and not as I say. What happens when we are challenged to step into that place and to do a new thing here and now, today? We need the agitators like Mary, who aren't going to let us sit back. We need the Martin Luther King Jr.'s, the Malcolm X's who are going to push us out there. We need the Thomas Friedmans when it comes to the environmental issue, who are going to challenge us and say, "Don't you get that something needs to be done?" The Will Steegers who are going to speak at forums and challenge us again and again. And as much as we may chafe against it at times, we need leaders in Minnesota 350. We need Black Lives Matter. We need people who are going to continue to push us to say we need to step out in faith and do a new thing. We need to step into that place of challenge with Jesus. And sometimes some of us don't like it. Sometimes I don't like it. And yet on this Sunday, we know that it becomes a sign of the kingdom, of the realm that is yet unfolding. The witness. Are we willing to see and be part of this? Imagine these stewards and these servants milling about, all of a sudden realizing that their jobs are on the line, shaking their head. And Jesus says, take these barrels and fill them up with water. Take it to the chief steward. They do the work. They step in. They didn't ask a lot of questions, at least not in this version of the story, though they may have had some pretty serious doubts going on in their minds. But they step into that place and they put their trust that God's hand is moving, that things are at work, being changed, transformed. And of course, then we get that comedy, that levity, as the chief steward takes this sip of what had been water and goes rushing to the bridegroom. Look, you have saved the best for last. Don't you know you're supposed to do that first? So then once everyone is drunk, you can pull out the $2 chuck and let people just drink the $2 chuck. Don't you know that? Here you have saved the best for last. An incredible time of transformation. An invitation to step into that with some comedy and some wonder. I think there's a place for all of us in this story. I think there's a place for the agitators, the Marys. I think there's a place for the Jesus who's holding out, wanting to see what's next, questioning perhaps his own authority, his own place of privilege, struggling with what it means to do a sign, to actually see a miracle done in community. I think they're the stewards who step in perhaps with hope and wonder, with doubt and questions. There's the chief steward who just imagine his face lighting up when all of a sudden something incredible has happened there in their midst. What are the pieces today that you will latch onto? In the midst of everything in the world, in the midst of everything in your life, how are you being agitated? How are you being an agitator? How are you putting up walls? Saying, wait a minute, the time isn't right. This doesn't feel just right. And yet, how perhaps begrudgingly are you going along? Trusting a larger process, the voices of other people, being willing to be in community even when it's really hard and it doesn't always feel good. How are you putting in your questions, your doubts, your wonderings, and letting the process unfold? And what sign are you latching onto at the end? You see, in the Gospel of John, this idea of signs becomes so significant that beginning here at Cana and all the way to the cross, the signs that Jesus carries out become mile markers of God's realm breaking in. How do we latch onto those signs that will continue to transform our hearts? Turn us from one way into another. Like the water in these great basins, perhaps it is a time for us to be changed, transformed, knowing that the best in us and in the realm is yet to come. Thanks be to God. Amen.